Ronald Barndt. I worked here from 1968. I retired 2008. And during those years, I've done quite a few jobs, titles. I was a heat treat. Well, let's start with Plant 4 shortly after I got here. I worked in draw benches at Plant 4 with Billy King. And Billy King taught me how to set up and done everything. And he'd take a little break, and I'd run the draw bench at 189 until he got a little rusty and brought up a wonderful man. And then I went to the draw bench operator, where I operated on the big bench for a while. Then I went to the next bench down, and I never did get to the little rods on the other side. From there, I went as a utility man. The utility man filled in for anybody that was absent or sick or whatever. And I held that position for quite a few years. Then I went from there, after I went through the extrusion on the breakers and so forth. Then I moved on up the end of Plant 4 at the raw material receiving on the platform. And I ran high lift, operated the crane as a utility man there. And when somebody's off or on vacation, I filled in. And after Mike Allman retired, I went up in the crane, and that was one of my positions. Rotated 3 shifts, but still, I was up in the crane. And that went on for quite a few years. Then the apprenticeship came open for a heat treater down here at the lower end, hardening steels and so forth. So I bid on that, and it was a 2-year apprentice working. You got your 2 years in there, and you learned all your steels and the chrome and the nickel and how it made different draw temperatures or hardening temperatures for that particular job. I'd done a lot of forged dies for up here, a lot of draw dies for Plant 4, draw dies for the automatics machine. And it was warm down there, but it's still, you was your own boss. You said on every now and then, John Benninghoff would come down. He was my boss. John would come down and he'd look around, come over and flip the papers over. Oh, he says, "Oh, you got some forged dies going through." Yeah, I got 4 dies going through. So. But he was another Superman. John Benninghoff was a really good man. And I had some good bosses. Fortunately, again, I had some. We always had a chit-chat or knick-knack or whatever you want to say. But for the majority of the time, I can't say I had too many bad moments here. You're going to interview a couple of the guys that worked for me, took care of my machines. You'll see Jack Schultz. And he took care of the machines. He kept them calibrated, kept them machine. So when he does, sometimes he was in there and out of there in 20 minutes, and sometimes he's in there in one of those moods he didn't have to be out there. So I'd have easy time for 20 minutes to 1 hour. When Jack was finally out of there, I had the furnaces calibrated, and I'd go to work. And one of my buddies died for second shift. And that was Gary Harder. And that was rough for me for a while because he was a real good friend and we worked together. And of course, then again, I had to work quite a few hours. And then Dwayne Weaver came down, and he's on the apprenticeship program. And he could only work with 8 hours. So he worked while I was training. And finally, he got us apprenticeship then, and we worked. And you had some bad days. I mean, it's like anything else, you know. Some days you go out there and stub your toe, and other days you go out and run them off. So, but no, I had a good time, and I had some good bosses. I can't complain. Of course, the ones that didn't know anything about heat treating, they wanted to stay away because I knew heat treating. When they made a goof up, hey, wait a minute, you can't do that. And they were good. Basically, that was heat treating. Besides that, I was sometimes your guys were in the draw for 4 hours, and some of the others are 6 hours. So there's occasion you're going to have anywhere from 3 to 6 hours. So I'd come up to the tool and die and shoot the breeze with them, and we'd go over there and die cast and shoot the breeze with Lloyd and them. Of course, my brother-in-law worked over there too, so I shot the breeze with him a little bit. But that's one nice thing about Cerro. Cerro was a place, family place. My father worked here, my uncles worked here, and it just felt it's part of your life. So you follow your tradition. your parents, grandparents, and Nobles. That's where we used to have Cerro had your picnics down there at Nobles. And from the day I went down, I'd take my stepchildren and my children, and we just made it a yearly thing. And even till today, I still take the young grandchildren down, and spend 3 days down there. That's about what my wallet could afford.
Yeah.
But they had a good time. I mean, that's one thing. That's more or less a family vacation. 3 days of Knowles. It'll come to me. My memory's getting shorter and shorter.
Yeah.
Well, one thing, it provided a work and stable force for so many years. And our fathers, our uncles, and it passed down to us. And it was me and my brother, Steve. Of course, he left and went to university, so. But then it's getting pretty thin in here. They're just closing it down and started that. But then I got out of here before it closed down, so. Because I had enough time and was able to do it. So. Other than that, Cerro treated me good, gave me a wonderful living. Was able to buy my boys four-wheelers and scooters while they were small. Of course, then again, I told them I'd put the down payment on the car, but you boys have to pay for the car. So they each got a hold of their aunt in the restaurant down there at the interchange there, Interstate 80. They worked in there with their aunt, and she'd put them on certain jobs, and they made enough money there after school and so forth. So when I bought the Mitsubishi vehicle, and they was able to take over the payments, had enough, and of course, they didn't have enough to make sure the insurance was paid, but I made sure the insurance was paid because I didn't want it to come back on me. So they done a good job. I can't complain. Nope, I was born and raised in Ronald, Pennsylvania. It's just 13 miles to the north, foot of the Snowshoe Mountain. So I spent some time in Germany, and I spent some time in Korea, spent some time in Vietnam. So that was during my military career. And Desert Storm, I was called back to that. Part of my duty, Uncle Jack, my dad, Uncle Bill, all my uncles and that, they all spent their time in the military, anywhere from 3 years to 6 years, depending. Air Force is normally 6 years. That was Uncle Bill. But no, I can't regret anything. Of course, you always have a bitch or something about walking around under your breath, but yeah, it's you got to take the rocks with this, uh, rocks with this stuff.